You would have seen the headlines over the last few months about the man called Max McCosker, Australian, loving, gay, and whilst going about his own business on holiday in Fiji, charged under that country's Victorian anti-gay laws and kept in custody in a scenario scarcely believable in the 21st century. Here now is the story of Max's ordeal, in his own words.
Thanks, Adam, and I'm a heterosexual, and I'm also a member of the Also Foundation. Max is one of nature's true gentlemen. He is deeply respected by the many who knew him as a responsible, efficient and caring department manager when he worked in a large textile factory before it closed. I also know he worked in aged care and made himself available as a carer who assisted with the personal needs, the home duties and the supervision of the elderly and the disabled. He went on to become devoted to assisting the local Aboriginal people and spent endless hours developing training and employment opportunities and projects for them. He had a deep understanding and an excellent rapport with the Indigenous community. I had a feeling that he was gay, but I was never quite sure, except that he was shacked up with a guy, and this guy was called Kevin, and they seemed to be doing everything together. Not that that ever mattered to me. They were great blokes, great neighbours, and great friends. How would you feel if your neighbour was a sex-crazed, rampant homosexual who preyed on young males, someone who was heavily into porn and went about making movies to sell on the internet? Someone who engaged in disgusting and shameful homosexual acts. Someone who committed crimes that were so disgusting that it would make any person vomit. Now, for a lot of you people, those words have certainly been around the worldwide media. Well, this is how my best friend and neighbour Max was presented to the worldwide media following his holiday in Fiji. Now, what would you do? Go and help his partner Kevin chuck all his belongings out onto the front lawn and let himself get out of the mess? Might sound crazy, but it was suggested. Let him serve his 2 years imprisonment. After all, he deserved it. He should have known that homosexual was illegal in Fiji. How many of you people knew it? He deserved what he got after what I read in the paper, and on and on and on it went. Where is the justice and the human compassion in these thoughts? How could I just abandon Max, my friend and my neighbour, and just leave him there to rot in an overseas prison? It was certainly not the Max that I knew. Yes, he is gay. And yes, he befriended a local person who became a holiday companion. And yes, it's no one else's business what happens behind closed doors between two consenting persons. How would you feel if you were judged and deprived of this basic human right to privacy? He believed it was the right thing to report the $1,500 missing from his wallet. Wouldn't you? Little did he know that 48 hours later he would be in prison for 2 years. I can still clearly hear him say to me in his one and only phone call to me, "Alan, I've been set up." They say hindsight is a wonderful thing. I went on a holiday to Fiji. I had $1,500 taken from my wallet. I reported this to the police. 48 hours later, I found myself in prison, sentenced for 2 years imprisonment. What was meant to be a holiday turned into a nightmare. Time does not permit me to tell you everything I went through, and there are things that I would still have great difficulty
and sharing with you. I know within my heart that I've done no wrong. I've had many lies and mistruths told about me. I'm determined to correct this. I hope in time that what has happened to me will result in a change to the laws and attitudes that still exist towards homosexuality in Fiji and throughout other parts of the world. I keep asking myself the question, why me? I would like my life to be back the way it was before all this, but I know it can never be. I know for the time being, I need to find strength to tell my story. I did what was right. I reported my money stolen to the airport police just before I was about to leave. Not long afterwards, 2 policemen approached me and said, "We want you to come with us." I sat at the police station for 5 hours, not knowing what was going on. I was eventually questioned late into the night. It was outside, under a tree, and I was being eaten alive by mosquitoes. I spent the night on the floor at the prison station. The second night, I asked if I could lie down. The policewoman questioned me, saying, "Do you really want to go in there?" I lay on a rat-eaten foam mattress wet with urine. I had just been charged with gross indecency, and the sergeant advised me to plead guilty, and I would receive a fine and would be able to return to Australia. When I got to the magistrate's court the next morning, it had all changed. I was now being charged with unnatural offence, indecent practice between males. I was never given the opportunity to contact the Australian Embassy before court. I had no legal representation. I was never given the opportunity to defend myself. I apologised in court to the Fijian government and the Fijian people. I did not know that homosexuality was illegal in Fiji. The magistrate made judgments and statements that were not true. The transcript of what happened in court that day appears to be hastily written because the High Court requested a copy. It is definitely not true and contains things that were never said or asked of me. I was put in a holding cell. All I could think of was what was going to happen next and what was happening at home. I shared a bottle of water with other prisoners in the extreme heat. Human excrement was 6 inches high on the floor. I wanted to pee and I couldn't hold back, so I did what I had to do. As I was being taken to prison, a very large policewoman held out her hands and said, "Max, God is with you. God loves you." With that, I could not control myself and cried freely. In prison, I was told to pick up an old foam mattress, 2 dirty blankets, a drinking bowl, an old Gillette razor, and a much torn mosquito net. I was taken to a cell and told, "This is the best we've got." The previous prisoner had wrecked the cell and water was flowing through the middle of it. I could not eat what was pushed under the cell door. I had to shower twice a day in cold water, no soap, and was frightened what might happen to me. The others would stand and watch. I'm sure they'd never seen a white man before. I was given a job of fixing an old sewing machine and repairing the prisoners' clothes. At least I was outside and getting some fresh air. I stitched up the seams so that it would take me several hours to unpick them. That way I got to stay outside. I remember the officer saying to me, "Mr. Max, can you come back tomorrow?" I thought to myself, well, I'm not going anywhere. Of course I can come tomorrow. But that tomorrow never came. I did not know that my friends in Australia were being denied any contact with me. I had heard from no one. I was alone, frightened and desperate. I was introduced to a lawyer in prison who promised me that he would have me out and home in no time. So I engaged him straight away. Little did I know what lay ahead. He was quick to take my money, even money that was provided to him by Australia, which was to be passed on to me in order to live. I do not want to comment any further on this man. In the end, I sacked him, and I currently have a complaint against him for professional misconduct and misappropriation of funds with the Law Society of Fiji. People ask me what assistance did I receive from the Australian government. I can only answer very little. I had a visit in prison. I asked for a minister of religion or a priest. It never happened. I was promised daily contact. It never happened. I was told that things take time, like taking little baby steps. Because I was not in jail, the Australian consulate believed that I was in a position to find my own lawyer and receive all the legal assistance I required. But there were times when I wanted advice and I wanted to know what I could do next. Thank God for my supporters in Australia. At least I could rely on them.
Listening to the stories tonight, I can honestly say I feel sick, and it's not about speaking before an audience tonight. It's about hearing about what members of my profession have said and done in relation to what happened to Max McCosker. One of the most concerning things for me was reading the statements of the trial judge in the case, Justice Shah. His actual words were that the acts allegedly committed by the men was something so disgusting that would make any decent person vomit. And as Alan said, this has been widely reported. Now, as a lawyer practicing for over 6 years, I have never heard of comments like that being made by a trial judge in any court in this country or indeed overseas. It's an extraordinary thing that a trial judge should be able to make statements like that in a highly prejudicial to the way in which the trial itself would proceed. Now, the conviction was overturned by Fiji's High Court in August. Homosexuals have protection under Fiji's constitution, but as I said, former colonial laws banning consensual homosexual sex remain in force. And these laws actually provide for sentences of up to 14 years imprisonment. So that is basically what Max was facing. 2 years is the minimum sentence. It could have been up to 14 years for what he had allegedly done. However, as we know, an appeal against the High Court decision to Fiji's Supreme Court has now been lodged. Now, what does that mean in practice? Well, Australia has an extradition agreement with Fiji. What this means is that Mr. McCosker could be arrested in Australia and transported to Fiji. The Federal Attorney General's Department, which we contacted, has refused to comment on whether extradition proceedings have been begun to remove Max to Fiji to face his appeal. And a spokesman said it was department policy to never comment on any aspect of extradition proceedings, particularly, and this was quite striking to me, when the foreign country involved specifically requests confidentiality. I'm not quite clear why confidentiality should be such an issue now, given the very extreme statements that have been made today.
My homosexuality has never been discussed. They have never asked. I have always been the odd one out in the family. I'm an embarrassment to the family name. They couldn't even communicate between each other. The only time that they made contact with Alan was when they were worried that some publicity about me, about fundraising, was mentioned. They made it quite clear that there was to be no publicity. They wanted to keep their heads buried in the sand. I have a sister who understands and had the guts and courage to come and support me in Fiji for a couple of weeks. Many had not made the connection that Kevin and I had been an item for 25 years. We lived our lives in private. Even Kevin's 86-year-old father, who was staying with him at the time, did not know. It was Kevin who had to break the news. He also had to cope with the reaction from the family. He put his job on the line by supporting me in Fiji. I could not have survived or coped without him. He gave me strength. My lawyer referred to him as one remarkable man. I know that I'm a lucky guy to have had him supporting me. The media coverage in Fiji really upset me. It was grossly untrue, what was reported. I asked other prisoners not to show me anything unless it was positive. I was afraid for my safety. To be gay in Fiji is really scary. You don't know who is going to turn up or what is going to happen. I did not want people to know my name or where I was staying. The hotel increased their security for me. But no matter where you went in Lautoka, Bar or Nandi, people knew who you were. Fiji is a small place, and I had a huge public profile for all the wrong reasons. I saw Fiji, not the beautiful images portrayed through the tourist brochures, but from the other side. The poverty, the beggars being ordered off the streets, their working conditions, and the way people were treated, and the filth. I volunteered my services to work with the deaf and the poverty-stricken organisation. I found I could relate to them in the same way as my work with the Aboriginal people here in Australia. I saw what little resources they had to work with. I communicated with them and offered ways to do things easier and better. As you are aware, the Fiji government is against homosexuality, and the Methodist Church is a very powerful movement in Fiji. There is a general attitude that homosexuals should be stoned to death. This statement was made by a member of government, that homosexuals should be whipped in public. This was a statement made to the local paper. Inflicted with corporal punishment, caning. This was said to Kevin and myself by another lawyer, that this could still possibly happen to me. I had very strict bail conditions imposed on me. These restrictions, where and what I could do. Even accused murderers and rapists out on bail had greater freedom. I had to sit through their court hearings and hear the terrible deeds that they had undertaken. My only so-called crime was to have had consensual sex in private. I never knew if I was ever coming home again. I put my faith and trust in God to see me through. My health was deteriorating and my nerves were shot. But for somehow I found my inner strength to get me through. I prepared for freedom. Although I had often had my bags packed before, but I found myself unpacking them time and time again after every appeal had failed. It was very hard to say goodbye to the dear friends I had made in Fiji. These I will never forget. People ask me, what has all this cost me? It can be calculated in financial terms at $250 per hour and $2,500 per day to represent me, and $4,500 for every appeal. I'll leave you to estimate that side of things. My personal costs, my health, the endless hours spent by my supporters, how can you put a cost on that? My life has been a roller coaster. My greatest feeling is sitting on the plane, praying for it to take off. I cried and cried at the lights of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Opera House. When I landed in Melbourne, I hugged my partner Kevin and said, "You have taken me home. Out of this nightmare must come some good." Whilst the decision of the High Court is being challenged, there is hope for those in Fiji and the Pacific Islands whose attitudes towards homosexuality can be changed. That in itself will give me great comfort. In time, I will rebuild my life and my strength to move forward. I know I have done no wrong. I want to return to my work of helping others. Australia is a great country. I'm home amongst friends. I'm truly indebted to the Also Foundation, to Adam and his support, to Kath at MCV newspaper, Joy Rodeo, and to Lorna from the Age newspaper in their support for my freedom and for justice. To my partner of 25 years, Kevin, to my dear friend Alan, thank you. Although I do not know many of you here tonight, thank you for supporting me and believing in me. Within my heart, if we support each other, together we will make a difference. And thank you for bringing me home.
We all know that there is much to be done to help those worse off than us. Out of this must come some good. We pray for those in Fiji and other countries that have to live in fear of persecution, that in time the attitudes and the laws will change. Most importantly, we find comfort and solitude in the fact of you just being here to hear our story. For that, we are truly grateful. Thank you very much.